Let's see.
Let's see, chapter 2.
Yeah.
Interrupted your supper, did we? We interrupted your supper, didn't we?
I ordered it at 5:30. I heard to be done by now.
Yeah, it takes a while to cook enough for everybody here.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Yes, chapter 2, C is where we're starting. No, go down a little bit further. You'll go past A1.
Should be page 4 of 9, I think.
Right there. Yep. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you. Still here.
Good to go? Okay. Did you got the recorder? Good evening, everyone. Sorry there's a slight delay. We were getting everything together. But I would just like to welcome everybody here tonight to our special planning and zoning meeting to go over the proposed regulations. Like I said, again, I would like to thank everybody for coming via Zoom and all of those that are in person. I will start this meeting by doing roll call.
Chase Harbor present.
Ken Moritzik, present.
Holly Roberts present. And Blake Greenhall and Crystal Sinek are absent. So tonight, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, we are currently on Chapter 2, which is our zoning districts, Section 3, authorized uses. At the last meeting, we went through A1 districts, which is agriculture district. So at this meeting, we're going to start with residential districts, which is Part C. Our plan is that we'll go through each zoning district. We'll read clear through it, open it up for public comment, and then open it up to commissioner comments.
We'll have to come in on the ag.
Oh, yes, I will. Thank you for reminding me of that. I will say too, the plan for tonight is that optimistically, we will go no further than the end of Section 2 or Chapter 2, Section 3. We'll go no further than that. We will also go no later than 9. So whichever one of those two things happens first. Optimistically, we can work through these quickly, but we'll be very efficient. So first of all, I've had a request that there was a comment on that we missed on the A1. So I would like to allow that comment before we move on to Section C. So, sir, would you like to?
Thank you. My name is Steve Christensen, and my concern is that it's a practice that isn't done at Jackson Fork Ranch in Deadshot, and so that's why I think I missed the issue. But I've been speaking to other ranchers and other attorneys about the changes to the A1 zoning permitted uses. And here's the situation I understand, that a lot of A1 zone owners, A1 zone property owners, often have prime fishing and hunting lands. And it's not uncommon for them to charge a fee for folks, third parties, to come and hunt on fish in their land. And so I don't see in the permitted uses that this would be permitted, that an owner of an A1 zone property could charge for somebody to come on their property and fish and hunt. Now, recreational uses are permitted on all zoning districts, but if you read the new definition of recreational use, it's non-commercial. Okay, so I'm concerned that, and then there is a CUP, permitted use for outfitters, but if I'm the owner and I'm just charging for somebody to come in onto my property to hunt or fish, I don't see how that's a permitted use. And so my concern is that, traditionally that source of revenue for A1 zone properties, just to charge folks, hunters and fishers to come on the property, is not provided in as the A1 zoning permitted uses are changed. So that's my concern.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment on the A1? Because I know we did kind of cut that short the last time because we ran into running out of time. So before we move on, is there any other comments on the A1 that we missed out on last time? Anybody online have any last minute comments on the A1 before we move on? Yes, sir. Oh, I'm so sorry. Would you mind coming up here and talking in the microphone? And just so everybody knows, especially those that are in the room, if you will come up and talk in the microphone, those that are in the room and online, if you'll please state your name, and then you can go ahead with your questions or comments.
Hi, Jason Moyes. Quick question about, and it's similar to what Steve asked about, and maybe it's more tied to the definition section, but it talks about ADUs, and ADUs are specifically defined as a unit that is not rented, and then the language in Chapter 1B, subsection D, the rental of an ADU, does that change the definition of an ADU, or does the language in the definition of accessory dwelling unit where it says not for a non-paying guest, sorry, the last 3 lines, used for the housing of non-paying guests or family members of the owner and occupant. Do we have a potential contradiction there when we're saying this is a non-rental unit, but it can be rented in those districts? It's confusing to allow both. And if the holidays get nearer and we have an ADU, I would appreciate language where we have to charge family members to use it, so I don't have space for them. So just a question on that.
No, that is a great question. Definitely. Thank you for bringing that up. And for everyone's knowledge too, so we chose not to go through all of the definitions. What we were planning to do is, as there were questions on the definitions as they tied to each section. So feel free to, so that was a perfect time to bring that up. Thank you. And that is something that I would agree seems to be pretty contradictory, that we need to look at that for sure.
I also agree. I personally can't think of an example of an ADU that is not rented in like most of my experience.
Right. Or that doesn't fall under an ARU, like a bunkhouse, you know?
Sure.
But you're right. Okay. So we definitely need to look into that. Okay, is there anybody else that has any comments on A1?
Are we still looking for them, or can we comment?
No, if we can go ahead and comment.
Okay. I had a question, I guess, regarding Steve's question, or Mr. Christensen's question. So we spent a lot of time on ag last time, and it got a little muddy there for a bit. And so my question is about the accepted uses and the language that was chosen for incidental to ag use. So like hunting and fishing, for example, wouldn't seem to be incidental to ag use. And I guess in general, I take issue with that, the language that was selected for ag, mainly because I think there's a lot of uses that should be allowed that aren't necessarily incidental to ag. And we've had some emails come through posing the question, like, if you own ag property, are you then required to engage in agricultural activities? Can you just live on? I think that came up at the last meeting too. And I guess I'm just concerned about even just the legality of that. I don't know if I'm asking the question right, but
Right. So I would agree. I don't like the use of the word incidental. I don't like to say that it's a requirement that's incidental to ag use, because the thing is that if it's an ag, if it's zoned ag, in order to get the ag exemption in regards to property taxes, you have to prove that to the assessor's office, whatever that, and that has nothing to do with us. But I don't think that it should have to be incidental to the ag use, because there's lots of businesses that I can think of. I mean, even just running a small home business, if I wanted to start a pottery business
sure.
out of my bunkhouse, it's not it's incidental to ag, but it's under a home business, and I think that you should be able to do that. It shouldn't have to be directly related to ag. I don't like the verbiage of incidental to ag use myself.
So that may be a question for Clayton. Is there, as far as what county is able to regulate to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the county and the residents, is there an issue with that language?
Well, I'll just come up there so I can. Evening, everyone. So I think there does need to be some clarification on what incidental means. So in the conversation last week, or not last week, 2 weeks ago, if you recall, there was a little bit of conversation about, okay, well, does that mean that it is that a person makes less money on the incidental use? Like, one is secondary to. And so I think that as this conversation has kind of developed, that has been kind of the general idea of like, oh, well, if it's an incidental, that means it needs to be secondary to. And I guess that's the question. What from a policy perspective do you all mean when you say incidental? Does it mean that it's a smaller use, that you're using less acreage than the agricultural use? Because you could look at it from a variety of ways, and I think that creates some confusion. So for discussion's sake, let's say you have a 1,000-acre ranch and you are haying 500 acres. You are running yearlings on 400 acres, and on 100 acres of it, you are wanting to make that a guest ranch. But the guest ranch, based on the way that this area of the world works, with tourists wanting to come here and see our beautiful landscape and all those things, you're able to make more money off the guest ranch than the hay operation and the yearling operation. Okay, so is 100 acres incidental to 900 acres? Or is it the dollars that are coming in on a person's taxes that they're reporting income on? Is that what you mean by incidental? And I think that's a piece that needs to be discussed and figured out all this. Mm-hmm. Because, to the point, like, if you think of the most recent, we had a kennel that came through on ag land, conditional use permit on Butner's Place on 40 Rod, if you guys recall.
Yes.
Okay. How big was how much of the space were they using? Like, what does that look like? Was it incidental to what they were doing for the ag? Like, in the event that this restriction existed when you considered that application, would that application have passed muster? For discussion's sake. So I think that's a piece that you need to decide first of what do you mean by incidental? And from the legal perspective, yes, I think it is important to always be looking through the lens at every single regulation of, is this something that actually promotes the public health and welfare of the community or Sublette County? So is what we're doing actually doing that? Do we have a way to say that it's doing it? Now, granted, the word welfare is pretty broad. Health is less broad. Safety is probably even less broad than health or welfare. So it is pretty broad, and you can probably shoehorn many regulations into that welfare aspect. But that's what I would say. So think about it from that lens, because that's the county's authority. Just this week, the Wyoming Supreme Court again said that counties they are not a sovereign entity in and of themselves. This was the case, the Teton County glamping case that occurred, that was up in Teton County, of course. The county commissioners lost that fight, and the state regulates that 40-acre section that's out there near Wilson. And the Supreme Court said, Teton County, you only have the authority expressly granted to you by the sovereign, which is the state. So always be thinking, is this promoting the public health and welfare of the community? And then also think of it through the idea of, I told you I was going to pontificate and you asked me, so here we go. I'll try and wrap up here. But I don't know if we talked about this last time or not. But always be thinking about property as it is a bundle of sticks. And think about what's happening with those bundle of sticks. So if you own property in fee simple, means the entirety, meaning the surface and the subsurface, and you can do anything on that property, meaning there's no zoning whatsoever, you have every single stick possible in that bundle. Well, as the county overlays zoning, the county is forcibly removing some sticks. So they've said, or the county said in 1978, I live on residential property out in Cora. On my residential property, I cannot have a roller coaster. They have taken my roller coaster stick out. They've said, we are, by our authority granted to us, we're taking your roller coaster stick out. They've also said I can't have a convenience store, a variety of other things that they've said I can't have. So just by virtue of zoning existing, we have reduced the number of sticks that are available to a person. Now, the conversation comes up often about this term by right use. So if we think about all of the things that are listed above the conditional use line, we think of those as by right. So by virtue of owning that piece of ag land or residential land or whatever it is, you have a variety of sticks that are in there that you can use regardless, without having to come talk to the county first. The conditional uses are kind of locked aside, and they say, well, those are your right to use them, but you can only use them so long as the way that you are going to use them is not detrimental to the public health and safety of the community, and that it is in accordance with the zoning rules and regulations, and that it is not materially injurious to the neighboring properties. Essentially, for all intents and purposes, saying, can you do it without screwing everything up? Can you do it without reducing the value of your neighbor's property? So I promise I'm circling back. So if the county then says, well, all of those conditional uses now have to be incidental to the remainder of the sticks that are available in there, is that a restriction that is beyond the county's authority? Is it something that is beyond where the county is essentially locking those things out and essentially taking those sticks away, as opposed to simply saying, well, you have to get our permission to show us that you're going to do it right first? Is that another layer? Or is the county essentially saying, well, you have to show us you're going to do it right well, you're going to not screw everything up, you're not going to do screw up the neighbor's property, and that you're going to do it and make less money than what you're doing over here? Is that a bridge too far from the perspective of a governmental taking? Those are the lenses that I would encourage you guys to think through, because that's what the court is going to look at in the event that you all make a regulation and somebody says, pound sand, I'm going to do it. And then we end up in an enforcement situation, and we end up in a court battle over whether or not the county actually has authority to restrict a person's use according to the regulations. That makes sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Recently, I've been told that
no, that was
a little bit too rambly, and But if you have any questions on that, verbose, that's a good word. It's a $10
That's
word.
impressive, Chase.
Don't be putting too many $10 words out there, otherwise it's no longer incidental to the rest of your uses.
So it's essentially, we've got to be really careful about taking away a right that's.
Well, just
Or-
be mindful of what is overlaying the word conditional doing? Are you, for all intents and purposes, saying you can't do these things because they're going to be too lucrative? Or are you saying because they're going to be too big of a piece? Just think about what is the net effect of overlaying the word incidental there. Are you effectively destroying the ability of a person to do that use because there's no way, based on the nature of a person's agriculture, because let's get real. When we think about the actual physical spaces that are in ag, there's a lot of physical spaces that are not really production oriented spaces, whether they be hillsides that can't be grazed, they can't be hayed, they're in forest areas where, yeah, a person could cut down that forest and sell that stuff and that would be ag, but then they've essentially lost the ability to produce on their land. So I think we need to think about, what do you guys mean by incidental? And are we considering all of the diverse types of agricultural properties in this county? Because yeah, if I've got a chunk of ag and it's 500 acres and 300 of those ag acres are on a rocky hillside out near Boulder, the hell am I going to do with it that is going to be able to produce enough income that anything could be incidental to the income being produced by the agricultural operation on that land? So those are just thoughts on what that word incidental is doing, because it is hampering it a lot.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Thank you for that clarification.
Of course.
Just one second, Mr. Christian. Ms. Malkowski, can you?
Just a quick question on what incidental means, or what the definition of incidental is in this circumstance?
Give the definition of incidental.
I don't think
I think we talked about this, but it's like relating to.
Okay, yes. So the definition of incidental is related to the primary use, structure, building, and or facility. So according to this definition, am I reading this properly?
Are you in chapter, which chapter?
In chapter 1, the general definitions, it says incidental is the related to the primary use, structure, building, and or facility. So if I'm reading that right, that would mean that anything under the conditional uses under A1 would have to be related to an ag use. Am I reading that right?
And I guess that's the point, is that what you mean? Because in other conversations that's come up, it has often been talked about from an income perspective.
Right.
So I think there needs to be some clarification on what you guys mean by incidental before you overlay it over the price. And under this, I don't know if Kay had an additional comment.
Do we have another microphone?
No, they said that this was all that we had.
So I guess using this as because this would be the updated. So the current regulation reads connected with, associated with, or related to the primary use. And then updated definitions as related to the primary use, structure, building, and or facility. So think about that. So think about that from the perspective of a temporary workers camp. Okay. You've said that it can be incidental. Okay. We've talked about it in terms of dollars and cents. Is that what you mean? The language in the definition says that it has to be related to so on and so forth. So if you're going to have a temporary camp there, based on your current definition or what you are anticipating to use as a definition, related to the primary use, structure, building, and or facility. So is it a temporary workers camp to run cows? That would probably be the only thing you could do with that.
Right.
Does that mean that you could have a temporary camp here on or Chase and I have properties next to each other? I'm over here. He is building a who's he, what's it, whatever. It's going to take a lot of time, effort. It is going to take a lot of people. Does that mean that I could put a temporary camp on my property? And then the workers that are working on his property, can they stay on my property and go work on his property? Or are you saying no, because the workers camp that I want to put on my property is not actually related to the primary use on my property, or the structure on my property, or the building or the facility on my property? So you've created a situation where, nope, can't do it because it's on the neighboring, because those guys are staying on a camp on my property, but they're going to go work on the next door neighbor's property.
Right.
You said no. And so think about that from all of those, for all of those potential uses. So yeah, and so kennels, dog breeders, does that mean you can only house dogs and breed dogs that are cattle working dogs because it is related to the cattle operation or the sheep operation that you have on the property? Is that what you're saying? Gravel pit. Is that only if you're going to use the gravel on the property, or how on earth do you relate a gravel pit to an agricultural operation?
Or a golf course.
These are questions that I think are important to consider
Absolutely.
before overlaying with the incidental.
Yes.
And related how?
Right.
Like, incidental in the common usage of the word generally means secondary. So do you mean related and secondary? What do you mean? How does this work?
So we
Or do we
essentially have to redefine the definition of incidental,
Well,
or reword that.
reword, whatever.
I think that it deserves some clarification, because as that has come up in conversation in actual applications, if you all can recall,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it has come up in terms of
It has, yeah.
dollars and cents.
Which I guess works good for the county assessor,
Potentially.
but not so good for.
But either way, from an enforcement perspective, it is an absolute nightmare, because let's get real.
Yeah,
Like, find me a rancher that tells me that he makes the same amount of money every year. So then how on earth could you enforce and work? So for discussion's sake, if you had incidental being from a dollars and cents perspective, which it has been commonly talked about, how on earth does that work? So what, in the year that beef is low, that the guest ranch outdoes it, or the dog kennel or whatever it does outdoes it, and therefore you're in violation? Probably put a turd in that punch bowl for you guys, and I apologize.
Thanks. Mr. Christensen.
I'd like to make a point of clarification, and Clayton, you can tell me if I'm wrong. The name of the district is agricultural, but there is no affirmative duty to use the land in an agricultural manner, okay? Agricultural use is permitted. There's other uses like living there, whatnot, okay? So if I own property in the agricultural district, but I don't use it in an agricultural manner, and then I look at the conditional uses that are permitted, because I don't use it in an agricultural manner, I'm never permitted to use any of the conditional uses. That stick is taken out because I'm not using it in an agricultural manner. And so 2 weeks ago, we recommended, and so that incidental use is a gatekeeper or a requirement to getting into the application of receiving a conditional use permit. Okay, and so 2 weeks ago we requested that conditional language just be strict. Here's the conditional uses. Come before us. We have to make sure that you're not going to harm the neighbor's property, whatnot. But we don't need to go through that threshold issue of, is it incidental to agricultural use? Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments on the A1 district?
Holly, this is Bettina Sparrow. I'm online.
Hi, Bettina. How are
Hi,
you doing tonight?
I'm great, thank you. I apologize for not putting my hand up, but I can't figure out how to, so I'm just going to shout it out.
Perfect.
My question is general. I submitted some comments by email, one of them being that I think I suggested we should take up the definitions before in a different order than you all are. That's just an example. I did not receive any kind of reply that showed that my comments had been received. So that's kind of one thing. But the second really is, how are you handling comments that come in? You're not going to reiterate them at your meetings, and I'm not expecting to reiterate them now because you already received them. How are you going to review and consider my comments?
Well, first of all, I apologize, Bettina. I thought that I emailed you back. So I very much apologize because I did get your email and I very much appreciated your comments. And like I said, I'm very sorry. I thought that I had replied. So I mean, my thoughts is as we're going back through this as a board, we discuss the written comments as well. If anybody, I mean, I guess we could read the written comments. Does anybody have any suggestions? That it's a valid point. Thank you.
Bettina, this is Ken. I got your email and I did read it too, but I did not reply. I'm not very good about doing that, but I did read it and I considered what you said, and I appreciate that.
The only reason I bring it up is sometimes it's good to have a discussion. Our comments bring up other comments and other points. And if it's not brought up in the public forum, as long as I know that you all have it and will consider it along with all the other comments, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And absolutely, that's it. I know myself personally, whenever I get comments from anyone via email, I print them off and then I take notes from them to add to my notes, is what I personally do. So they are definitely being noted and taken into consideration for sure. So, and thank you for your time to write in, because we really do appreciate and need all the comments that we can get. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think I get most of them 2 or 3 times because I'll get them directly and then I get them forwarded as well.
Yeah, that's probably my fault.
But yeah, we are definitely read them and consider them. And historically, I would say we could read all the emails because normally it was only 1 or 2. But as we're going through this, we're getting a lot more. And so what I tend to do, I mean, I referenced earlier when I was commenting that we've been receiving a lot of emails, and I've also gotten personal comment from people just out in the community that I consider and will reference those, but I suppose I should print them and maybe highlight the sections that are pertinent, and so that's a good note and something we can definitely improve on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on. I don't see anybody else that has any more comments. So we're going to move on to part C, residential district. So again, I will just briefly read through this and then we will open it up to public comment. So in residential district, which is noted as R, where the lots are not being served by municipal water and sewage, disposable systems, and the site improvements, i.e. water, sewage, fire protection, streets, etc., are not constructed to meet or exceed the requirements of the municipality providing such water and sewer service. So this is what's allowed. 1 single family dwelling, excluding mobile non-conforming manufactured homes. 2, livestock shall be maintained in accordance with Chapter 3, Development Standards, Section 32 of the Zoning and Development Regulations. And 3, conditional uses that are allowed is a bed and breakfast. In the rural residential district where lot size is 6,000 square feet per dwelling unit, an R6000, and the lots are being served by both municipal water and sewage development systems, and the site improvements, i.e. water, sewage, fire protection, streets, etc., are constructed to meet or exceed the requirements of the municipality providing such water and sewage service. Allowables are 1 single-family dwelling, excluding mobile, non-conforming manufactured homes. Number 2, livestock shall not be permitted. 3, vehicular and recreational type property storage areas for the exclusive use of the property owners of the subdivision within which the storage area is located. Ownership of the storage area shall remain under the ownership of the homeowners association or service improvement district. 4, conditional uses. Multifamily dwellings not to exceed 4 dwelling units per lot. The minimum size area required for any single dwelling unit on a multifamily lot shall not be less than 3,000 square feet, 6,000 square feet for a duplex, 9,000 square feet for a triplex, 12,000 square feet for a fourplex. And that is all for conditional uses. So, does anybody have any comments on residential district? Mr. Christensen.
So the red line struck out as a conditional use public facilities, and I was curious as to the reasoning behind that. Public facilities is still a CUP in multiple districts, including R6000, RR 51020, MH, and MFR. So I'm curious as to, actually, it was stripped out of those and left in industrial light. And so I'm curious as to the reasoning behind that, eliminating that, what is currently a conditional use being removed from this district. So that's the first comment. The second comment is it's interesting that bed and breakfasts are allowed in this district, but ADUs and rental of ADUs are not, as well as short-term rentals. There's no provision here for short-term rentals or ADUs. My concern with ADU, and this goes also to the new definition of an ADU, and perhaps that's why it's not included in the district, but the definition, if you look at the definition of an ADU, it has to be on a 2-acre parcel minimum. And so here's the hypothetical that I'm concerned about and want to have you all consider, and that is this: what if I have a residential home in our district, and I've got a nice basement, a sunshine basement, everything like this, and I want to create an apartment, an affordable housing apartment for somebody to live in my basement. As I read the current rules, there is no, first off, there's no provision to have an ADU in this district. There's no provision for a short-term rental. And so I guess I could come in for a bed and breakfast CUP. So then I would have to serve breakfast to my basement renter every morning, right?
I'm gonna come live at your house if you're serving breakfast.
But so I just find it odd that as a conditional use we'd have a bed and breakfast, but I can't create an apartment unit in my basement and rent it to a long-term renter anywhere in this district. And so that would be my concern. And so, and again, it's odd that bed and breakfast is a conditional use, but just an ADU or a basement apartment is not permitted. Thank you.
Dennis, do you have an example, I guess, of, I always just assumed most things were RR, but I'm guessing Shelter Park and maybe like the gun club are zoned residential? Up on...
The
those are the only lots I can think of that are, most things are RR and acre or bigger.
So I do not believe that there is much just straight R zoning within the county at all. So all of Shelter Park and those areas are all RR. Set up here, that's all RR. R was a zoning district, I think, developed to work more closely with town municipality and such. But off the top of my head, I do not recall where there is any, because everything that we pretty well have is RR. Let's go down to Big Piney here. We still don't have, yeah, there's nothing on the exterior boundaries there. Honestly, I do not know if we have any R. There's RRs, but there's not
an
R.
Oh, okay.
Let's look at the trailer park down here. Up out of town. I go too far, I went too far. Mobile home. Honestly, I do not know if I've ever seen any just straight R zoning.
Maybe we can eliminate.
That was my thought, and that kind of goes back to the discussion about RR and consolidating it into a single zoning type where we're able to look at an application without the lot size restrictions. A developer can apply based on the property that they're trying to subdivide, and we get to have a say in what lot sizes are acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no R anywhere, I agree. I don't like that it's missing a lot of uses that are accepted in RR, and I don't know why they wouldn't be, but I guess it doesn't matter if they don't exist. But it does seem kind of pointless.
Right.
When you are removing it, you're also removing the ability to change to it.
Right, but if there was just an RR, or maybe we make R a better zoning type that could be utilized and
Right.
still do the RR thing. Just a thought. Is there a question?
What about larger, that little bubble leak and they got.
I think
They got a well, or a community well as part of that.
I think section
It's MH, it's mobile
Yeah.
home, RRMH.
section 8's mobile home, and then the rest is RR.
That was the only other one I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good thought. That's a good thought.
So I would agree that if we do leave it in, so it still is something available, but I think we definitely need to add.
The other part to that, if your rural residential was not held to a specific size, currently Sublette County requires 2 acres for well and septic. If rural residential that was associated with municipal water sewer services would come in, and then it would meet the development standards of that water and sewer district, similar to the town. So it could still be rural residential county, but to have the availability to change the sizes of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, and that would be similar to like Shelter Park, where you've got either water or sewer, and then you have either a well or septic, just not both because of the lot sizes.
Yep.
Or Barger, where you've got community well and septics.
Yep.
Is there any other comments in the room for the residential district?
It's public facilities. Is that like churches and stuff?
No,
Or-
so here, yeah, I was actually going to read that. So the definition, as we have it in here, of a public facility is a place or location support structure, or piece of equipment that provides services available to the public at large and are owned, otherwise operated, or funded by a government body or the government. So would that be
What is that?
like, would it,
Would it be like the auditing grounds or something like that, if you had like a historical site on your place?
on your place?
That the government or some entity like funds.
Right?
Are you referring to Fort Bonneville up there, or?
Yeah, just something similar to that, like there's some historical society or something that's funded through the government, but. Yeah.
I don't remember why we struck it, to be honest. I have no idea.
Yeah. I think that's something we need to look at. Because I don't know, like I said, because what's struck through is it says public facility, which may include, but is not limited to government buildings, houses of worship, hospital, and healthcare facilities, libraries, schools, daycare centers, parks, areas, and roads that are dedicated to the public, lands or building that are leased and owned, otherwise operated and funded by the government, by the governmental body or government. But that part was struck through.
But a cemetery, like a kind of a private cemetery. Don't they still have to have public access even if they're on private ground?
I believe so. Yes.
That's generally through dedicated easement.
So do you see any reason to strike public facility from that?
I mean,
Again,
we don't have any of the zonings currently, so there's not
Right.
even a good example. But just looking at, like the Duck Creek subdivision just east of me has 2 churches
Mhm.
that would fall under that, and it's RR. But it's within a mile of town. It would, or could arguably fall into that R designation if something like it were to be developed in the future. And I don't know why they wouldn't allow a church or something like that.
Right. I think we should definitely look at.
I'm assuming those are both well and septic too. And maybe that was part of the reason, was they wanted those things on public utility. But there's certainly examples of them that are not.
Right. I think we should look into that. Maybe we can quiz out Chris and Blake more on why they struck that. Okay, is there anyone else in the room that has any comments on residential? Mr. Moise?
May I come up here?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, you can take
Yeah,
the
we
mic
can-
back there.
Yeah, you can
If you're gonna
pass it
talk
around.
about it.
Can I drop it too if I say
Yeah.
something?
Yes,
worth
you
the
can.
mic drop?
Yes,
I won't.
do it.
What was that?
As long as you don't break it.
Yeah, I'll jump it. Sorry, I'll sit down sometime. And I think you are addressing this, but I just wanted to, again, talking about the condensing of the things and the removal of the public facility. I'm gonna go out on I won't. I'll take a wild guess as to why the public facility is a hot topic, but I noticed that the things in the public facility aren't referenced in other areas. So, for instance, I looked for the daycare, I looked for house of worship. Well, I found house of worship. I looked for hospital, I looked for nursing home, daycare, and other things, and they're not in any of the definition of defined uses. And so if public facility is taken out, or at least that definition of public facility is stricken through and taken out of here, I don't see a way that those types of things could exist. Am I missing that, or did I, to your point about what is a public facility, a lot of things were put in there as non-contemplated, maybe entities or enterprises at some point, and changing the definition and then removing it, or removing it and changing the definition in whatever order, removes some currently existing opportunities or uses. Right, and my concern is if people are currently doing that, is taking that out now, do they get grandfathered in, or are they out of compliance, or the person that bought a parcel a year ago with the anticipation of doing this based on the regulations, are they now out of luck from whatever they were trying to do by altering that? So
Dennis, do you know of anywhere else that those things that were crossed out from public facilities where they're defined? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else in the room? Okay. Is there anybody online that has any comments about the residential district? Okay. With that being said, commissioners, do you guys have any more comments on that before we move on?
I think we better address that public facilities.
I completely agree.
I guess I have one question. This came up at our last meeting. I don't obviously like these arbitrary numbers that we throw at things. I think it's nice in a regulation setting to have neat little boxes you can put things in, like the RR zoning sizes or the multifamily dwelling square footage. I don't understand why we have a requirement that they must be 3,000 square feet per unit. I mean, that's in my experience, a pretty big multifamily. I don't know where that number came from, or
Was that the lot size or the building size?
oh, sorry, that is the lot size. Yeah, you're right. Phew.
Oh, I looked at it the same way that you did, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good
okay.
call, Kenny.
Yeah.
I was like, why is that so big? Okay. No,
that makes sense.
All right. There again, it would be nice to know why, even with the lot size, but we don't have any examples of it in existence currently. So, but I guess, do you have an opinion on a lot size for multifamily? Is that reasonable? No, Jason. Last meeting we were hoping to have some developer comment. I don't know. I don't know I guess it's fine.
Take the mic with you.
thank you. I'll try to remember that. The rationale for the lot sizes typically center around other needs that go along with the development standards for multifamily. For instance, if you have a requirement that each unit has to have 50 square feet of private open space or 100 square feet of communal open space, that you get to that lot coverage percentage restrictions, and those are typically based on other local needs for water retention or non-paved areas of the lot. So there's calculations that go into that to calculate how much water is going to fall off the roof, how much green space do they want, and number two. So at that the site coverage is usually meant to cover other stricter development standards that we don't have. And because those will also coincide with maybe a required number of parking spots per unit outside and different things like that that really drive that that site size requirement per unit.
I guess that's all. I'm just wondering.
Okay. All right, so if there aren't any more comments on residential district, we will move on. All right, so the next section is section D. In the rural residential districts, RR, RR5, RR10, RR20. Single family dwelling, including mobile.
Excluding.
Oh, good job. Sorry.
Kenny's on it tonight.
He is on it. Maybe you should be reading, not me, Kenny. Single family dwelling, excluding mobile non-conforming manufactured homes. Livestock shall be maintained in accordance with Chapter 3 Development Standards, Section 32 of the Zoning and Development Regulations. An ADU, rental of an ADU, and conditional uses include bed and breakfast and 2 or more short-term rentals. So we'll start off with comments within the room. Is there anybody in the room that has any comments on this? Oh, we'll start up here and then we'll come back to you next. Okay, thank you.
This is going to be a repeat performance. Again, the definition of an ADU requiring a 2-acre minimum lot. I don't know why it's just not, the sunshine basement that I want to rent out and not have it be a bed and breakfast. And then Jason also pointed out that here we're permitting a rental unit of an ADU, a rental of an ADU, and the definition of an ADU itself does not provide for rents. I would point out again, public facilities again is struck out, and so we have that same public facilities question that's raised. And then finally, we're opposed to any limitation on the short-term rentals. The short-term rental chapter of the regulations already says it has to be a duly qualified dwelling unit on the property. And so by virtue of the limitations on what can be built on the property itself, it's automatically limited. And so, for example, in this section, in rural residential, you're permitted to have a single family home and 1 ADU. So the most that you could turn into short-term rentals at any point in time would be 2. So why are we saying 2 or more short-term rentals? We'd prefer that this be struck and that the short-term rental chapter govern this provision, this section.
Hi, John Scanlon. Just want to ratify the previous comments from Mr. Christensen. I agree with all of those. Also wanted to ask, what does 2 or more short-term rentals mean exactly? Does that mean 2 or more rentals of the same property within a particular period, or does it mean 2 or more different rental properties or structures? What does it mean? Because it seems like it says if you have 1 rental, that's not permitted. You have to have 2 or more.
I'm wondering, so I don't believe that either of us were here when this was put in.
Well, don't count on mine.
But something, if I'm thinking of how this may have come up, so obviously you have the structure requirements, but what if you had like a sheep wagon or a yurt or, some sort of temporary structure that you're trying to STR as well?
STR, a non-permitted structure.
Okay.
Thank
Why
you.
not?
We'll get to that.
A TP?
Also, is there a 2-acre? Hi, I'm Heidi Scanlon. Go with John. Also, I'm just a little confused about the acreage issue. Is it a 2-acre minimum to have these ADUs, or for example, we have 1 acre, and I guess that's my question. Is it a 2-acre minimum?
It is.
That
Why?
the way this is,
Rural residential in Sublette County is 2 acre minimum. There are lots that are there that are grandfathered in that were created way back when. But any new created lots since the mid 80s are 2 acres or more.
For all ADUs?
No, for all residential.
Oh,
yeah, so or the ADU automatically applies there. But it is in the definition of the ADU that the minimum site area for an ADU is 2 acres.
So things like Shelter Park, Barger, the Gun Club, none of those could exist today or be applied for today.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't hear my question answered. The one about
Sorry.
two or more short-term rentals. I'm not sure what that means.
So if you, when it was read, it's not as easy as when you were looking at it, but so the rental of an ADU is a by right use. So you could do one by right, but if you're going to do 2 or more, then you have to have a conditional use permit in order to do that.
So basically, if you were to rent out your primary residence and then the ADU.
Correct. If you had a property that had a big house and a guest house, and you were going to rent both of those as a short-term rental, you would need a conditional use permit in order to do that.
To rent both of them out.
So it's 2 units as opposed to 2 times renting a particular.
Oh, correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
just to, I guess, clarify further, so the 2 acre requirement for an ADU, somebody in Shelter Park could not build an ADU.
Thank you.
Is that correct? Because of the 2 acre requirement?
Apparently, yeah, if it's taken out of. Most of the lots within Shelter Park are combined lots, which then either give them rights on each lot or they are larger than.
Then
They are larger than acreage size. Generally, there's 2 lots, so if they build on one lot, they can build on the other lot.
Okay.
A question on so in other places I've been, there's an ADU and a junior ADU. And a junior ADU would be, it's an attached. I converted the garage. I have a 5th bedroom off the side that doesn't get used. So we rent that out. It's attached to the building. It's not a separate structure. Is that contemplated to have this in rural residential? If you have a house and you want to rent out a room, it's a fully furnished second primary suite, whatever, with a kitchenette, its own entry from the building, but it's attached. Is that contemplated as an ADU, or is that contemplated as a room rental? The structure I've seen to these is that ADUs are divided into 2. There's junior and senior, or whatever you want to call the other one. The one is detached, one is attached. And part of the rationale for that is it helps someone in an area that, say, housing is really expensive. It helps people offset the costs of that. If housing is challenging to find, it helps people find an affordable place to live too. And often it's a great second source of income for someone who all of a sudden finds themselves with some extra space in their house. So how would, if I had a house where I wanted to just rent a room or convert the garage, I'm not building another building, what would that fall under in the residential or rural residential realm?
So according to the definition, the accessory dwelling unit definition says a permanent secondary living unit that typically has a separate kitchen, sanitary facilities, and a sleeping area existing within the same structure or on the same parcel as the primary dwelling unit. The accessory dwelling unit may be a separated and detached unit, an attached unit to the principal structure, a repurposed existing space within the principal structure, an apartment over a garage, or a similar structure. An ADU structure may not exceed 1,200 square feet in size, exclusive of a basement or crawl. Inclusive. God, the struggle is real tonight. Inclusive of a basement or crawl space over 5 feet in height, exclusive of garage, and shall be designed and used for the housing of non-paying guests or family members of the owner or occupants of the main dwelling on the site. The minimum site area of an ADU is 2 acres. So my answer would be is that yes, what you're talking about, if it has a separate kitchen, separate bathroom, and sleeping area, then it is, even if it's within the same house, like a basement apartment or a garage apartment, it's considered an ADU.
I mean, this just says typically. It doesn't even, it's not a requirement. I mean, if we're discussing the definition, I don't like the non-paying thing, obviously, because it contradicts the ADU section in RR. I also don't think that we should have a minimum site area because it excludes the lots that are RR that are grandfathered in. And so if we're not adding new RR lots that are less than 2 acres, there's not going to be any new RR lots that don't meet that requirement. And if somebody currently has an RR lot that's less than 2 acres, I think they should be able to have an ADU.
I would agree with that. Sorry, I'm just making some notes here. Okay. Is there anyone else that has?
So just to follow up on Jason's question, Mr. Moyes' question, sorry. I know you said that typically you have seen the 2 different definitions. Are you suggesting that we look at adding the junior ADU? Does this encompass both options sufficiently? I didn't know if that was a suggestion or not, I guess.
No, what I'm envisioning in this case, you have a home and you have a room within your home that someone can live, and you rent that room out. And now if I am on a 5 acre, 10 acre, 20 acre parcel and I want to build an ADU, I would have to come in and get, in fact, I don't even think I can, because I think the language is said 2 or more short-term rentals. It didn't say that I could have another ADU. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I would not be able to build a 1,000 square foot structure that could be another rental option for someone. And I think my struggle is on a 5 acre parcel. I mean, this primary structure, junior ADU, and secondary ADU are typically done on 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 square foot lots all over the place, and they work great. So especially when you extrapolate that out to a 5 acre parcel where space is not an issue anymore, I'd wonder what the rationale or what the nexus to the welfare of the community would be in limiting a person from being able to use their property to their fullest use and being able to rent out a room and have an additional ADU structure on there. Is there really a driving factor into restricting someone's right to do that?
I don't know. I don't have a desire to do that personally.
I mean, that's a great.
I could also think of like an example just like that where, you know, you have a house, like in a guest house or an ADU that you rent. You know, kids grow up and move out and you've got a big house that you don't utilize anymore. put a kitchen in the basement. I mean, we have examples of that in town where
Mhm.
people have converted a basement to either a rental or a short-term rental. And just because, they want to keep their house, but utilize the space or, make some extra money. And so I would agree that I think we shouldn't necessarily limit from a government perspective anyway. I think if HOAs want to do that, but I'm not interested in doing it.
So do we want to, okay, yeah. So do we want to entertain the idea of adding another definition? Or do we want to word it that just food for thought, I guess.
Sure.
Because I kind of like the idea of adding like an attached ADU or a detached ADU, have those. It's not a bad idea. It would clarify things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we.
Okay. I think we definitely.
Okay.
Jane, you want to go ahead, ma'am?
I just have a question. So if I go out and I buy a 5-acre lot in a 5-acre subdivision, R5, and I've got my house and my barn and a horse, and my neighbor comes along and they start out with a 5-acre house, and then they want to say they rent a room in their house, their kids move out. Probably don't have a problem with that. But then can they build another structure on that 5 acres and use that as a rental?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say yes. County rules allow for a 1,200 square foot, up to 1,200 square foot guest house.
So then, when I bought this 5-acre lot, my reasoning was, I had 5 acres, it was going to be single family homes. Basically what I would be buying though is a 5-acre lot with a single family house and possibly one other house or 2 other houses or however many a person can get under a conditional use permit and a sewer and water. I mean, if I applied for that, what would you say? I come in, I have a 5-acre lot, I've rented it, my kids are gone, I've rented a room, I want to build a 1,000-acre structure here, I need the income, I'm an old person, and I want a 1,200 square foot structure here, and I have the room for the water, and I have a room for the sewer. Can I do that under these regulations?
The way it's currently written, it would require a conditional use for.
Correct. It would require conditional use, but that could be granted. So as a homeowner or as a person that goes out and pays, I don't know, $600,000, $700,000 for my house on 5 acres, I am not guaranteed that property value is going to be maintained because of what my neighbor could possibly do. Under the conditional use permit.
A house and a.
Yeah. One house, one accessory structure.
Accessory ADU.
Or ADU.
Yes.
So essentially on a 5-acre lot, even though it's owned R5, you can have 2 homes. Well, I mean,
Yes.
You can have a house, you can have a conditional use with a house.
No conditional use. You can have one primary structure and one guest house or accessory structure that's less than 1,200 square feet.
Maximum.
Not accessory structure.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
ADU. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry, I misspoke. Yes.
So essentially, you can have two houses on the 5 acres.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I understand with the conditional use permit, but you can have 2 houses on the 5 acres.
No
No.
conditional
So-
use required for that.
Oh, so you can have,
And that-
so I could have 2 houses on the 5 acres and I don't have to worry about a conditional use permit. But I could
Correct.
come in with and request a conditional use permit for a third short-term rental.
No.
That would be, so if you wanted a conditional use to rent a room as an ADU in your main house? Okay. Yeah.
It's just a room.
And so, I'm sorry, your concern is that you feel that that would degrade the value of your property.
Well, it possibly could. I mean, if you go out there and you go to Sublette County, and what Sublette County really has is its beauty. So you buy 5 acres and you spend your 800,000 or whatever to put the house in the acreage and everything. And then all of a sudden, all around you, your neighbors are developing other essentially houses. I mean, we can call them all sorts of crazy different names, but they're actually putting another house, a smaller one, like 12,000 square foot. All your neighbors are developing other houses. You got other traffic. You've got it's not the same. It just is not the same. If you go out there and you buy in a subdivision, and I'm buying 2 acres, well, of course, I'm going to have more people and more traffic, et cetera, but I understand that I want a 2 acre lot. I'm not on a 5 acre lot or a 10 acre, maybe 20 acre, it doesn't matter as much, but I would, and I know, and I realize with the conditional use permit, I could come in as the neighbor and protest it. But how often does that work? Honestly, the guy wants to put up, oh, I need the money, I need this, I've got to put my kids through school. Sorry, Joe, you should have read the regs. He could do this. We're going to give him the conditional use permit. And so the problem I have with it really is not that if you want to allow people to do that, but I think it should be real clear. So for people that aren't as used to zoning regs and all the nuances and what an ADU is and a short-term rental, that they understand when they go out and buy a 5 acre lot for whatever, that their neighbors can do stuff like this, because then you're starting to create multifamily. Any way you look at it, it's a multifamily unit. It's a duplex. It's a duplex with a third additional structure on the lot. So I think all I'm saying is you have to be a little bit careful of also remembering that other people are buying adjacent property, and when they look at the regs or the property, they go out there with the real estate agent and they're buying a 5 acre property with a house and a barn, and their neighbor has, a nice house and a barn, and all of a sudden that could change real quick. So when you say things like 2 or more short-term rentals, it confuses me. Not that you can't have them, but it confuses as to what your goal is here.
So just to clarify, currently you can have a house and a guest house or ADU up to 1,200 square feet. The conditional use is for the short-term rental, not for building for 2. is how it's written currently, or in our updated regulations, what we're discussing right now. You can have your guest house and you can short-term rent it currently. And so as far as your 5-acre parcel that you're talking about, that is currently acceptable. And I'm a real estate broker, and I do go over the county regulations with clients and tell them what they can and can't do with their property. And in my experience, that's usually a benefit to buyers and also increases values, not the opposite. But your concerns are noted.
I think it sounds to me, and I hear you. I'm not arguing. It just sounds to me though. I wonder. I think, well, if I wanted to go buy 5 acres in a 5-acre subdivision in Sublette County, and have it be just a normal 5-acre subdivision, which is however big a house, possibly a barn, possibly a workshop, and not necessarily all of a sudden be running into short-term rentals. It's a different ambience is what I'm trying to say. I mean, and it doesn't sound like that is something that you can do anymore in Sublette County. That's not protected.
You always have the option to seek out subdivisions that have covenances and HOAs. And that's what they're formed for, are specifically that is to have stricter regulations. And for those folks that are looking for that, that's what I would highly suggest, is to seek out those subdivisions. And that's why they have individual covenances and HOAs.
Okay. I hear you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Are there any other comments online? So something that I wanted to hit on and circle back around to what Clayton discussed at our last meeting was the possible combining of all of the RR districts. Clayton, would you mind giving a little recap on that? That would be great. Thank you.
And I didn't mean this to derail the meeting last time by any stretch of the imagination. I really don't want it to derail today either. But we do have in our, we have rural residential, RR5, RR10, RR20. Then we have our RR mobile home, RR mobile home 5, RR mobile home 10, so on and so forth. And I'm wondering if it makes sense to simply just say we have a rural residential zone. Now, it came up last time of like, well, how do you do that with subdivisions? If someone's going to do a subdivision, they come before the county both at the planning and zoning level, and then also the Board of County Commissioners level, and they ask for permission to rezone, which is a legislative action. The county has full control over that, to rezone something into what would be a subdivision. And at that point in time, the county can make that call and say, this is an appropriate area for 5-acre lots. This is an appropriate area for 10-acre lots, so on and so forth, based on water resources, so on and so forth. So that was mainly my suggestion. So then, because there's not really much difference other than the size, I think there is some setback differences that Dennis probably knows off the top of his head that I don't, when it comes to those different RR5, 10, 20 areas.
So then you could still do like a combination. So like if you had a subdivision, you're like, this is a good section for 5 acres, but then this section should be 10s.
Certainly. So think of what we're doing with our acreage limits is we're controlling density. And so the county's saying this area is, and so perfect example is the neighborhood that I live in. When that was developed in 2008, it was originally planned out to be much smaller acreage lots. And during that process at the planning and zoning level, based on the aquifer and everything else, ultimately the county said, yeah, you got to have mainly 10s and 20s and or 10s and 15s and a few 5s. And that's, so they expanded the density, didn't expand it, they limited the density to the 5 acre lots. So just as, and I'll go ahead and call him out because he's in the room, the most recent subdivision that's in process right now is limited to 5 acre lots. So that is saying that the smallest in that zone, in that subdivision, have to be, they cannot be any smaller than 5 acres. So in that same area, a developer can, if they are granted a subdivision permit and says, yep, go ahead and build 5 acre lots, that's the smallest they can go. But based on the terrain and everything else, they can go in and say, well, we want some 5s over here, but right here, based on this hillside, there's not a whole lot of a building envelope. We're going to make these 10s, so on and so forth. Is that, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, it does.
And I think that was why I was primarily interested in it. Again, I just think that it limits not only us when we're looking at an application, but also the person trying to develop a piece of land. Like, it may not be divisible by 5, and once you put in roads and different things, or if you want some open space, maybe it makes sense to have a variety of densities that aren't nice round numbers. And I think that if we looked at them at each application objectively with what the lay of the land is, what the capacity is based on water and sewer and all that stuff, and it would give a lot more opportunity for creativity in the development process. And you'd also, instead of having these perfectly square 5 acre lots, maybe something that suits the terrain a little better, and also encourage more open space for wildlife or livestock or whatever. So I think it's interesting. I know there was a concern by Chris about if we were to move forward with that, if we would be creating some sort of I don't know if it was a legal issue with existing subdivisions that most of them, in my experience, have limitations on further dividing lots that are already within the subdivision, or it allows for like one time. But if you got rid of that, somebody that's in an RR20 could potentially come in and say, well, now that this is an RR20, I want to subdivide my lot into 2 10s or whatever. So I get that concern. I just think it would be a much better use case if we just had RR and allowed people to do what suited the property the best.
As I understand it, wouldn't if somebody came back and wanted to maybe re-subdivide something like you're saying there, wouldn't that fall under the commissioners, planning and zoning, and then ultimately the commissioners would make that decision? And instead of, I don't see where, I guess maybe there could be a legal issue there, but I would think that if it's in the regs that the commissioners could say, well, no, it's a 20 acre and that's the way it was going to be. So I don't know.
I think the concern Chris brought up, and I'm sorry if I'm misquoting him, but was so that we may be creating an issue where residents within a subdivision were doing something that's allowed now within the county, but is not allowed by the HOA, and it would create legal issues with the owner and the HOA, which would be a civil issue, not us.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? Jane, you want to go ahead?
I'm sorry. So just a quick question. So if you eliminated that, then based on that, couldn't most all of the property just be developed as, say, you'd have a 5 acre lot, maybe because of restrictions on the property, but the rest of it could go 2 acre lots?
No, because so whenever the subdivision was laid out, they would put a minimum on it. So like no matter what, there's a minimum of say a 5-acre lot. And so they can build anything above 5 acres, but they could never subdivide smaller, make smaller lots than 5 acres.
And where would I must misunderstood. I thought that you were going to kind of eliminate the RR5 and eliminate the RR10, eliminate the RR20, and just have RR. Is that what's not being proposed?
Yes. So, but the way that it's being, that it was just merely suggested is that it would just be RR, but whenever you came in to apply for a subdivision, the planning and zoning board and the commissioners would look at it and see what is the smallest lot that would be applicable and desirable for that specific subdivision. So then we would give the minimum. So like I said, for example, it would be a 5. So then the developer would know that they could make their lots no smaller than 5 acres. They could make it anything other than 5 or anything larger than 5. And so then whenever they can, and they would have that laid out whenever they go in for their plat layout. Dennis can actually explain this better than I can. Sorry. Go ahead, Dennis.
No, Holly, you are totally correct right there. And then also, once a subdivision plat is made, regardless of what those lot sizes are, those lots cannot be divided. They are whatever they are platted.
And most of the lots that are coming in to be divided are originally A1, correct? I mean, most of the stuff that you're getting to for development is originally A1, yeah.
No, the only thing that we are getting that can be subdivided is non-platted lots. So the zoning, it could have different zoning on it, dependent, but it has not ever been within a subdivision.
Can I get a clarification here? I was kind of under the assumption that the developer would come in and say, I want to have a subdivision of 2-acre, 5-acre, whatever lots. Correct. And then, but the planning and zoning and ultimately the commissioners would decide that, well, maybe that won't work. We can go ahead and do instead of a 2-acre, we can do the 5-acre. Is that?
That's correct. That's currently how it works.
Yeah.
In practice, yeah.
But
in practice,
if it took out this, if it all was just rural residential, but they would come in and say that's what they wanted.
Mm-hmm. It would still be the same process. It would
still be the same. Okay.
So why wouldn't everybody or most people come in with like a 2-acre subdivision plat? Or you could have, or if the map was platted out. So you have currently have a map and it shows RR5, RR10, RR20. I can't remember.
Yes, correct. On the GIS, if you pull it up, then it'll show you areas that, however they're zoned, RR5, RR10. Okay. Yes.
So in the future, that map would basically change, and it would basically be all wherever there was subdivisions, it would just say RR. Right?
Would we?
Well, if you're coming in and rezoning all the A1 to the new designation, everything that's rezoned for a subdivision on that map would just say RR.
Correct.
Because right now you could look and you can say, okay, here's 20 acres, 10 acres, 10 acres, 5, whatever. It'd be just RR or base. Yeah. So you just have basically A1 and RR zoning.
Correct.
And industrial and whatever commercials. So you'd have, okay, interesting. All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Moyes, did you have another comment?
I did. I think Clayton touched on this of a way to resolve maybe some of the, because it's as a if someone were to decide, if someone had, I don't know, just off the top of my head, 300-ish acres that were A1 and they were wanting to make it rural residential, there needs to be some certainty of what that person can do. And in order to spend the time and money and energy of preparing everything for the county. So the idea of, I'll just put whatever I want on there and bring it in, and the commissioners will say, oh, yeah, we like that one, or no, we don't like that one. It's very untenable, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I think Clayton touched on it. If there could be, and this is how it's done a lot of ways, is what can this land sustain? So if that 300 acres and there's a water study and there's whatever, and it says this 300 acres can support up to 60 households. Okay, well, that means that there can be 60 households on this, and it could be a combination of 2.5 acres because that's the minimum for septic. There can be some 2.5s, there can be some 5s, there can be some 10s, but as long as that map doesn't exceed the density that land can support, that should be allowed. Because if it's too arbitrary of, as a commissioner, I only like 8 acres parcels or bigger, or I like only 2.5 acre parcels, or I only like 15 acre parcels. It doesn't give a person the ability to do what their land can do. And if someone buys a piece of property or has a piece of property that can support a certain number of households and meet the restrictions of the county for the minimums, I think that would be a way that there could be some certainty on the landowner's side of what they could or couldn't do with the property, and it would take the subjectivity of the whim of the commissioners out of the equation, and simplify the job of P&Z and the commissioners in that, does this meet the requirement? Does it support this number of households, and does it meet the minimum requirements? And it's a much easier decision to make with less potential controversy, I think.
I guess I wasn't clear. That's what I was thinking, that after when the developer came, you would have those studies done as far as, and that would be what you would be basing your acreage or what your lot size on. So I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that, but.
No, I wasn't going on yours.
Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody else have anything on?
Okay, I just have one other question on that. I know I'm being a thorn in people's side, but I have a question. So, Sublette County's huge. Lots of places with A1. Say you go out to Myrna Junction, you go up there into the Wyoming range. Say you go down to Big Piney, you head back there out where the oil wells are, you go down to Boulder, you head out in that direction. And the developers are coming in and they're splitting this land. And let's do worst case scenario. Let's say that the land supports 2 acres, they split 120 acres, and it supports 2 acres, and that gives you 60 houses. And so pretty soon you're going to have, won't you have scattered development in a lot of different places? And how does that work with the fire department and the police department? Because you may have one house out there on 35 acres, or 3 houses out there on 120 or 4, something like that. And now you have 60. And you've got that up Myrna Junction, you've got that down in Big Piney, out at Boulder, Hoback's already kind of lost. So who pays for that? I mean, and then if you have a rancher, the next rancher sees that and he puts 60. So then you're going to be putting fire departments. I mean, what is the cost? That's my question. What is the cost?
I would think you'd have a bigger tax base to pay for these things if you had more houses there.
Well, I think with all due respect, if you look, you're going to find that residential development doesn't pay for itself. What's paying for itself is obviously the oil and gas, your commercial guys. And I know there have been tons of study to try to prove that residential development pays for itself. But it doesn't.
Well, ma'am, I think the thing is that this is when we do refer back to our comprehensive plan and what our overall scope is for our county. And that's where anytime it all starts off with anytime that somebody wants to subdivide, they have to come and get it rezoned first. And that's where it falls on us as the board and the county commissioners to decide where it is that we do want these developments. And we try to do it responsibly and with good forethought. And we take all of those things into consideration. Anytime that we rezone anything, we have a long list of things that we have to take into consideration. And part of that is emergency services and how it's going to affect everyone else. And so, I mean, I think the only answer that I have for you is that that's just where we take it step by step. I completely understand your concerns, but we just take it one application at a time, and not all applications go through for rezoning. So that just falls on us to do the best that we possibly can to make the best decisions on where those developments should happen.
Okay.
If you go build 60 lots in Boulder, you'll be sitting on them for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, you might be sitting on them for a long time, but you might not. I mean, you know, with the growth and everything, I hear you. But
yeah, we're gonna move on. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to, yeah, that would be great. You're sick of me bumbling.
Okay, we're on E. In the residential mobile home district, RMH. Bullet point is single family dwelling, mobile, non-conforming manufactured homes placed on a permanent foundation. Livestock shall be maintained in accordance with Chapter 3, Development Standards, Section 32 of the Zoning and Development Regulations, Conditional Uses, Bed and Breakfast.
Okay, so pretty straightforward. Is there any comments or questions in the room for residential mobile home district?
Just the same as the previous rule. I don't know why.
With the public facilities?
Yeah, why that's
Yeah.
gone and why bed and breakfasts are in there. But just a question.
Right. Yeah, we need to get clarification.
I had a quick question on that. It's if it were to go to the strictly the rural residential or something, would the rural mobile homes be included in that?
I think mobile home, it would. Oh,
Or would it be kept like the rural
MH.
the mobile home would be its own section? So like you'd have the rural residential, all of those would be one, and then your rural residential mobile home
Yes.
would be separate, but they would all be one.
Yes. So it would eliminate the 5, 10, 20.
Yes, but they would still be.
But it
kept
would still be
separate.
a mobile
It would
home
just be-
designation.
It would just eliminate the acreage requirements.
Oh, okay. So right now, mobile homes are allowed where?
Larger, big country ranches, some of Green River ranches.
Okay.
Is there any questions or comments online about rural mobile home?
Next.
Okay, so moving on. Chase, you want to read the next one?
In the rural residential mobile home districts, RRMH, RRMH5, RRMH10, RRMH20, single family dwelling, mobile non-conforming manufactured homes placed on a permanent foundation, livestock shall be maintained in accordance with Chapter 3 Development Standards, Section 32 of the Zoning and Development Regulations, ADU, rental of an ADU, and then conditional uses are bed and breakfast and 2 or more short-term rentals.
So is there any comments? I mean, I'll just start off. I will say that I think the same comments that were brought up about rural residential, but in regards to A, combining them all, B, the issues with the ADU, the rental of the ADU. I mean, that completely applies to here as well. Why public facilities is struck from there. And then the question of if we can go ahead and strike 2 or more short-term rentals. I mean, I feel like right off the bat, we can just repeat ourselves with those concerns and questions. Does anyone else, or does anybody in the room have any other concerns other than the same thing that we basically had for rural residential? Because it's the same, except for this is just dealing with mobile home districts.
Okay, I can do G as well, if you want.
Okay.
In the mobile manufactured home park district, MH, any use permitted in the R districts, mobile manufactured homes placed on a permanent foundation, mini storage buildings for use of residents of the district, and no conditional uses, apparently.
That's kind of unclear, isn't it? I guess,
Yeah, I think that all zoning districts used to allow public facilities and
don't.
I'm trying to remember if we had a discussion about that and if there is there a proposed like public facility zoning or something in this that I can't remember seeing it.
Do you remember anything why they struck all the public facilities from everything?
So there was a narrowing of the scope of what a public facility was, largely I think to try and address the public nature, and they wanted to, or the groups, I shouldn't say they, the group discussed, the group discussed wanting to be things like public utilities and kind of narrowing that scope. Because it currently reads as an unlimited list. So it not unlimited in the true nature of like anything, but it was I think it says something like things like this, and then it lists out a few things. So then you are in this space of thinking, okay, what is like these 5 things that they listed? Churches,
right?
So on and so forth. So there was a limitation there. I don't recall a conversation in removing them from zoning districts, though. I don't remember that part of the conversation, but I do remember having the church conversation because it originally in the proposal that came up, it had eliminated houses of worship, and I was like, guys, we've got this, this pesky First Amendment that we need to make sure about keeping in mind. And so I do remember trying to be a smartass that night and making that comment. We got a couple chuckles like we did tonight, but some of the other things didn't come back in. So I think to the point that I don't know if it was Mr. Moyes that mentioned this, some of those things were stricken but didn't wind up back in other places.
Right.
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay. So we did, yeah. Obviously, that's one that we need to look at throughout. So is there any other comments on mobile manufactured home park district? Online? Okay. Moving on. H, in the multiple family residential district, MFR, multiple family dwellings. And then again, conditional uses was public facilities was crossed out. So, and that's it. Any thoughts? Anybody in the public have comment? Okay. Moving on.
You want me to go?
Sure.
Or you go. Kenny, it's your turn.
Yeah, it is. In the general commercial district, C1, retail stores and shops, businesses and professional offices and shops, restaurants and taverns. Laundromats and dry cleaning facilities, automobile sales, service and maintenance facilities, convenience store and or fuel station, banks and financial institutions, food stores, general stores and drug stores, resorts and hotels, motels, funeral homes, one residential use incidental to the principal commercial use, excluding the use of mobile non-conforming manufactured homes. ARU used by those employed on the premises and their families, excluding the use of mobile non-conforming manufactured homes. Modular manufactured homes, sales and display lots, conditional uses, transportation parking facilities, kennels, dog breeders, mini storage units, general commercial establishments, commercial greenhouse.
Okay, so first of all, I guess I want to just clarify for anyone that's not sure the difference between an ADU and an ARU, because this is one of the first places an ARU has been used. So an ARU is a single housing unit that is incidental to the primary business use of the parcel and occupied only by the employee or employees and their families whose primary employment is a minimum of 90 days in a calendar year. So just to clarify to everyone, that's what an ARU is. Let's just dive in. Is there any comment in the room on the commercial district?
I don't understand the ARU yet.
So that is basically, it's separate from an ADU because an ARU is specifically for an employee.
So
You need to.
It's back there somewhere.
Gotta get a mic back.
And state your name, please.
Buck Anspaw. So if I understood you right, you can only live there 90 days a year?
No, you have to be employed for a minimum of 90 days.
Okay.
So if an employer needs to be working for you for a minimum of 90 days and they can live in that additional unit.
Okay. Or the actual owner could live there.
Or the actual owner could live there. Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
First off, if you look at the commercial highway 1 district, they have as a, I understand, but this is what I want to contrast. Okay. They have as a by right use general commercial establishments. So the number 1 up there. I don't understand why in the C1 district that same by right use isn't listed. Okay, so why this is the commercial district? Why aren't we saying, look, we've got a list of specific businesses, but why don't we have a catch-all? I mean, all of a sudden we're limiting us to those types of businesses and those types of businesses only, right? So why isn't there the same language in the CH1, which just says general commercial establishments? Now, I understand that that may be too broad, that there's certain types of businesses that we don't want to or want to highly regulate. For example, sexually oriented businesses, there's a specific definition for that and there's specific regulation regarding that. But I don't know, again, this is the commercial district. Let's make sure that general commercial establishments can operate here, that they don't get hung up and saying we don't fit in within one of these lists, and so now we're stuck. So that's the first comment. The second comment is that we've stricken from a permitted use multiple businesses. And I don't think it's showing here. Can you scroll down a little bit? Oh, no, the other direction. Oh, right there, right there. Whoa, back up, or back the other way, right there, the red right there. Multiple businesses which are permitted by right or conditionally permitted. The best I can tell this means is that I can operate one business on my premises. I'm not, even though a second business might be permitted, I can only operate that single business. And I would recommend that this be added back, that I can operate multiple businesses on the single premises if those businesses are permitted within this zone. And actually, I would recommend that this multiple businesses provision be added to Section A, permitted uses way up at the top, which is for all districts. So if a business is permitted in that particular district, I would think it should be a by right, just like recreational use, and is applicable to all districts. And so either add it back here, or even better yet, add it back to the permitted uses in Section A, that it's applicable to all districts. If it's a permitted business, it can be more than one business. And those are my comments regarding C1.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Do you want some more?
Yes,
Okay.
of course.
I'm probably just echoing. I'm going to have to let you guys' words settle, and it's probably going to be the same thing I'm about to say, but I'll, in the C1 district, I'm trying to find where things like a gym would fall in. It's not a professional office. It's not a retail shop, but it would fall under, I'm assuming it would fall under a general commercial establishment, but is the purpose of moving that to really get that rigid in what we're going to allow in commercial districts, or is it, to Steve's point, there's certain ones that we do want to have a little more say on, and I think this is another area where it's really, there's a good potential to not contemplate future ventures or future things that could come up that aren't here. It's, you can't have a daycare in a commercial zone right now. According to these regulations, you wouldn't be able to have a private tutoring center in a commercial zone right now. And I don't think that's the intent to exclude these businesses. I think there's probably some intent that we don't want this specific thing, maybe, but it seems like that should be more called out, and the idea that someone should be able to put a business in the commercial district that is generally commercial in nature.
Thank you.
I feel like we've had these lists pop up before. The last one I can think of was short-term rentals, when we were trying to list out every type of thing you could potentially rent somebody to sleep in. And the issue I take with inclusion lists is I don't think that we should be, unless it's a very specific use, dictating what people can do. I think that if there's things that you can't do, then we could list those things. But to Mr. Moyes' point, when you make these lists, you're going to leave something out. And I agree that it's problematic.
So maybe that would be a better structure, is to list the things that we don't allow.
Yeah, or some language like is included in the general commercial establishments. I like something that's fairly vague, and if there are like the sex related stuff that is not allowed in that district specifically, I don't even, like, where do those guys go?
The heavy industrial,
Um,
the heavy work.
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
working girls go.
All right. So, but I mean, I just think that lists are problematic unless we are doing something specific, and businesses, like was said, there's new things popping up all the time. I think that, again, in the comprehensive plan, we're trying to encourage business and not overregulate, and that we could do that pretty easily right here. I also have a couple more points if you want me to keep going.
Please do.
I don't recall the discussion, or if I was even here yet, for the ARU. I suppose I have some concerns with that. I can think of multiple examples in town, which wouldn't apply, I guess, to the county stuff, but if anything, it seems like town's more restrictive. And oftentimes you have, a building that you own that maybe you have the ARU above it for an employee, but down the road, you change your business or something, you rent out the commercial space and want to rent out the living space, and the two aren't related and or incidental to. There's that word again. I think if we're allowing residential structures, I just don't like that it has to be incidental to the business. Unless we're trying to make that a conditional use, I guess, you could make them come and apply for a conditional use. But
Right.
I think, again, we've talked about housing shortages, and especially trying to get stuff that people that want to live and work in the area. And I guess if you have a residence available, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to rent it.
So I can think of an example, actually, right off the top of my head, is Nan's store. And then she has an apartment that's attached to the side of it that she rents out.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, in town, there's 3 off the top of my head that are that way.
Right.
That store has an apartment above it, the spa has a short-term rental above it.
Right.
And then also to Mr. Christensen's point, I'll just reiterate that the multiple businesses thing should definitely be accepted. I mean, in my building, we have 4 businesses.
I agree. And that was one of my, I had one that wrote down as one of my comments too. So going back to the ARU, would you suggest that we change that to an ARD or just
ADU?
Yeah, sorry. I feel like it's a Monday on a Thursday.
Why not have it so you can do either or? Because I mean, if you limit to one,
Right.
then you're gonna be stuck that way. But if they have it and you can let your employee live there, why not?
Right.
And if you don't, you still want to use that space, and it's always nice to have extra income to help float the other stuff, then you can rent it out. I don't see why you should limit it to one or the other. I think you should have it so they can do it either or.
Especially in commercial,
Exactly.
of all places. Yeah, you should be able to ARU, ADU. Short-term rent.
Right, I mean, that way you're utilizing the space and you're not limiting anybody from using it.
And just for the minutes and stuff, please.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
We need to just use the microphone.
Good job, Ken.
Do that. Yeah, but we don't know who's talking, in the minutes and stuff, and not nothing against, but we need to use the microphone.
Can you say all of that over again? List, you have to get a conditional use for business.
Permit. So
if you want a gym, you have conditional use for
conditional use
business.
permit. So
if you want a gym, you have to get a conditional use
conditional use permit. So I mean, in my opinion, I think we should move that general commercial establishments up and take out the whole list. Take out the whole list. And then than if there's anything that we don't want.
Yeah, I think, just trying to understand. Yeah, I think, just trying to understand where this came from. The idea is that restrictive than off-highway commercial, and they wanted to have or encourage highway commercial to have, a little more freedom, I guess, for those types of things. But I mean, most gyms are a good location for something like that.
Right.
A commercial greenhouse wouldn't really make sense on the highway. So I agree. I think I understand the intent is trying to encourage those higher traffic businesses to the highway and more professional service type places into off-highway commercial. But yeah, I again would prefer that people were able to make that decision.
Okay, are there any other comments on the commercial district in the room? Yes.
Sorry, I'll make it short. But this probably applies to other districts as well. But I think one of the things that we may want to consider as we're doing this is when we make a restriction, like you can have an ARU, and you go back to the definition of an ARU, and it has to be an employee that's employed 90 days there. Who checks that? And is that something the county really wants to take on of, hey, this guy was only working for him for 87 days and he's living in that apartment? Who checks that? Does the county have the authority to go check that? Do they have the authority to go ask for employment records? Do they have the authority to go see if the guy's really living in the apartment? Do they have the authority to see if it's actually the employee's family and not the employee's friend? That's just an example of does the county want to put so much restrictions on some of these things in areas where they maybe don't have the enforcement mechanism or enforcement capacity to really drill down to some of the specificity that some of these things are calling for. So
we have fought with that one quite a little bit, trying coming up with enforcement on different rules. And I don't know if we've ever come up with anything good that, it falls on the office to do that. And it's quite a little work to just get out and check the sewer systems and all the stuff that they do. And so it's a good point that far as being able to enforce something we're putting in here, if it's just in there for looks and maybe to really nail somebody individually, that you don't like, as opposed to getting everybody. It ought not be in there if we can't enforce it for everyone. I agree with that.
I think that's the bigger concern. There was one incident that was brought to my attention recently that was sort of like that, whether it's a neighbor or somebody just, doesn't like the way something looks, and you go target one of these instances, and then you better do it across the board.
Yeah.
And I do think it is an issue of enforcement. And also just the 90-day thing, going back to that, like with all the seasonal businesses that we have here, like, I mean, even just, I spend a lot of time at the coffee shop, and he will bring in somebody for July or something like that. And, why wouldn't you be able to put them up for the month? I don't love that.
Carrie, go ahead.
Thanks, guys. And thanks for giving your time to this. I know it's a Thursday night, so I really appreciate the work you all are doing for the county. I just wanted to add, since we're on the topic of singling things out, to remind you that you have a greenhouse on the highway. It's the Satchitananda, and it's there, and it's a business. It employs people. I know people that buy their vegetables at the pack because they deliver them, and they deliver them all over the county. They donate to different things in town. So you have a thriving greenhouse business located there. And when I saw commercial greenhouses was added, it was like, wow, are we targeting something? Are we trying to, because that would really affect someone's business. Because the whole business there is a greenhouse. So that's my 2 cents that I have to add, and I'll keep it short.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to make the same comment.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We got a greenhouse down by Boulder.
In Boulder too.
That one that when I first came on, we wrestled with
Yeah,
that.
Aaron Bells.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But now I don't remember if we rezoned that highway.
Yeah, that was a lot
commercial
of
or
some
something.
contention. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't know why it would be in here under conditional use.
Good.
Mr. Christensen, go ahead.
Yes, and I'm just looking at my notes. It kind of flip flops between a conditional use and a by right use, and so in the commercial district here in agricultural, it's actually a conditional use, but in the rural mixed district and in this district, it's a by right use. So we seem to be flip flopping around in whether it's permitted by right or conditional use, and I don't quite understand the rhyme or the reason.
We like to keep people guessing.
Okay, are there any other comments on commercial district, general commercial district? Okay, so we're going to move on and dive into highway commercial district.
Okay, in the highway commercial district, CH1, general commercial establishments, motels, hotels, and tourist facilities, resorts, restaurants, supper clubs, and drive-in restaurants, automobile sales, service and maintenance facilities, gift shops, entertainment and recreational uses, convenience store and or fuel station, one residential use incidental to the principal commercial use, excluding the use of mobile, non-conforming manufactured homes, ARU uses by those employed on the premises and their families, excluding the use of mobile, non-conforming manufactured homes, modular manufactured home sales and display lots, commercial greenhouses, and conditional uses are transportation parking facilities, public facilities, mini storage units, general commercial establishments, and campground. So I'm wondering, since these do include the public facilities, if the intent was that those needed to be rezoned to commercial rather than being allowed in the residential zones. Even though like a lot of subdivisions will say, you know, in the plat that one or two of the lots can be sold for houses of worship or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still just trying to guess why or how that happened, but
Yeah, I think we definitely need to refer back to Blake and Chris on that. Get some.
And then I have the same comments as before on the multiple businesses, the ARU, and the one. So this one has two options. It looks like one residential use incidental to, and then the ARU for an employee. Again, I don't know why it wouldn't allow for just general rental or short-term rental.
Okay, so is there any comment in the room for highway commercial district?
And I think these are just editorial. You'll notice that general commercial establishments is both a by right use at the top as well as conditional use the second to the last there. So you've got it in both places. Yeah. So I like it up above. Hopefully, you know, we don't keep it in the conditional use. The second item is that while we're saying commercial greenhouse here, Have you noticed other places it says commercial greenhouse slash nursery? So I don't know if there's a distinction or not. Again, this is just an editorial comment. If there is a distinction with a greenhouse slash nursery, I'd be curious as to what it is, or maybe it's just, we need to strike nursery where it's used elsewhere.
Okay, is there any other comments in the room? Okay, is there any comments online in regards to highway commercial district? Okay, commissioners, do you have any other comments?
Just the same thing with the list there. I think we're limiting more than likely some things that should be allowed and potential future uses. I don't know what the solution is, but I feel like there's some language we could come up with that would be more inclusive for businesses.
Okay, super. So no one has anything else, we'll move on. In the recreational service district, RS1, restaurants, bars, sports shops, bait shops, gift shops, marinas, golf courses, outdoor recreation facilities, ARU used by those employees on the premises and their families, excluding the use of mobile, non-conforming manufactured homes. Conditional uses, campgrounds, special events, hotels and motels, service stations, and resorts. We'll start off. Is there anyone in the room that has comments on the recreational service districts? Go ahead.
As you could imagine, this is one that's dear and near to our hearts because we have some RS1 zone property out in Bondurant. We are concerned about the changes that were made are being proposed with this district. Lisi Kroll made a comment at our last meeting that I thought was very, very interesting, and she said that why do we have conditional uses at all? Why isn't it just defined by the district? Now, I believe that conditional uses have an important role to play, so I'm not advocating that we do away with conditional uses. But what's interesting with these proposed changes is the proposed changes moves 3 uses into a conditional use. The hotel and motels, service station, and resorts were all by right permitted uses up above. And so my concern is the RS1 district, the nature of the district itself is service station, hotels, motels, and a resort, okay? So now all of a sudden you're changing the entire spirit of the district and making it a conditional use, making you have to jump through 2 hurdles, even after you've got it rezoned RS1, now you got this, additional hurdle to go and pick up these additional uses. So we're opposed, or we, do not like the idea of moving these by right uses into a conditional use. So that's the first comment. It's a substantial change to what the district means and what's permitted in the district. Now, the second comment I have goes to the definition of a resort. And could we pull that up? Maybe I can just read it real quick. A resort, an establishment that is a self-contained destination designed to provide recreation, entertainment, dining facilities, or overnight accommodations for its guests. Its purpose or main industry is catering to the vacationers, providing for almost all of its guests' needs in one location. Here's the problem we have with this definition, and that is that it doesn't talk about, well, first off, the language that it is a self-contained destination. And it appears that this language will prohibit off-resort sponsored activities like skiing, rafting, hiking in the national forest, day excursions to see national parks, etc. And so we request that this self-contained destination language be removed so that the resort could sponsor off-resort activities. The second issue is that it says that the resort's facilities are for use of the accommodations for its guests. And so in my mind, that means that you can't have, well, I guess I question whether or not you can have day guests, or is this open to the public? So let's say on this resort, we have a ropes course. Can we have a high school come and participate on this ropes course at the resort? Or does it have to be for the, overnight guest staying at the resort? We'd like to have it open to the public. Anybody that wants to come and use the resort facilities for that day, that afternoon, that evening, and would be permitted to do that. So the two changes to the definition of resort, and then kind of returning the by right uses to their standing as by rights as opposed to conditional use. Those would be our requested changes.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Is there any other comments in the room on recreational service district? Okay. Yeah. Joe, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Joe Harrell, appreciate the opportunity to speak. I also own some RS1 property that I bought under the current regulations, and I have some of the same concerns that Mr. Christensen has. The moving of items from allowed uses to conditional uses, and the reasoning behind that. I'd like to know about the striking of the multiple businesses item. Like Chase said, there's a lot of times where you may build a facility that you want to be able to do more than one thing in, and expressly prohibiting that thing. I'm not a huge fan of. And then along with what Chase also said about the ARUs in the previous zoning district, that seems to make more sense and provide more flexibility for that to be an ADU from both a usability perspective and an enforcement perspective. Seems to simplify things quite a bit. And then I think it's been brought up multiple times already, but the definition of public facilities, having that stricken portion removed so it includes some of those definitions.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis, can you remember why those were struck? Hotels and motels were struck from. You remember why? No, neither. Thank you.
Okay, Jane, you want to go ahead, ma'am?
Sure. So, with the resort zoning, and they moved the conditional uses to hotels and motels and service stations and resort. If you didn't have that in there, if they were not conditional uses and they're moved back to just being allowed, then could I, as a resort owner, just go put in a 600 unit hotel? Could I do it with containers, like those containers, shipping containers? Does the county not want to be able to look at what's going on that property? That's my question. So if you have I can't remember, it's RS1. If you're in an RS1 district and you're given that, then you can do the restaurants, sports shops, marinas, golf courses, outdoor recreation facility, and how much you want to do with a hotel, motel, service station. Doesn't matter what it looks like, doesn't matter where it goes, doesn't matter if it affects adjacent neighbors. I mean, how do you, if it's not a conditional use, then I guess that's what you're saying, right? Is that the gentleman that was talking, that he wanted it to become just a automatic right?
You want me to answer it?
Go ahead.
Yes, if it was moved to an accepted use, then it would be an accepted use. And I think that the where the county would have input is where they rezone those properties to this zoning type. And if they do that, then it has accepted uses within it.
But there's different, true, but there's different developers. I mean, you could have a developer come in and do this, and they could do some really great stuff that fits in with Sublette County. Or you could have, say, another developer come in and what the heck, make it look like Las Vegas or something. I mean, how do you not control that? Or do you care? Or you just, I mean, or you don't care? Really, if you put those other things up as just allowed uses, what you're saying is go for it. However it affects the neighbors, whatever it looks like. I mean, could I come in and put in if I wanted to, a 15-story overnight accommodations for my recreational use? I mean, and could you stop me? That's the question. Let's say that's so impractical, but could you stop me if I propose that? Could the county say, if it's classified as a motel, how would you stop me?
Well, I mean, there are certain regulations that we absolutely could stop you, because you have to come in and apply for a building permit, and there's building codes, there's height restrictions, there are restrictions. Yes.
But what are those restrictions? I mean, so how many units can I have? How high can it be? How many different buildings can I have? Are you controlling it by building permit? And then who approves that building permit? The zoning administrator, which I think they probably do, or the county commissioner? I mean, who approves that?
Well, first off, there are height restrictions. There are restrictions on stuff like that. And what I think we're trying to do is not have restrictions that will affect somebody that I don't like as a commissioner or whatever. So I would say, no, you can't do it just because I don't like you, essentially. And my neighbor comes in and I like them, so they can do what they wanted to do, and which would have been the exact same thing that the other individual wanted to do. So we need to not limit somebody or a developer or whatever on a kind of a basis of making your own, if it's not clear regulations, I guess. And if we get into the swamp too deep on trying to come up with, you've got to meet a whole book's worth of 800 pages worth of regulations or something. It just won't work.
And I agree with you 100%. You can't come up, I agree 100% with what you said. Where I differ a little bit with moving those conditional uses is you are essentially with your RR, you're saying you can't control everything that goes on with the land. And when you get a resort, there are all different types of developers. There are all different types of people with different ideas. And I do believe that the neighbors and the planning commission and the county commission has a right in that kind of development to look at the plan, to have input on what you're going to do. It's not just, I mean, what is the limit on how many units you can have in an RS? How many guests can I have on a property?
I think that's something that you need to take into consideration too when you buy a piece of property. If that you recognize that there is an RS1 located next to you, you go into that knowing that there's the potential that they could develop it however they wish.
And
not however they wish, but within regulation.
Can I interject here,
Yes.
please?
Can I answer her real
So-
quick? One thing. I agree with you with 100%, but a lot of times you're the person that owns the property and then it is rezoned next to you.
So that does go through a process, though. It's a
process.
That goes through the zoning process. And so all of the development that you are proposing comes forward in that zoning process. So that is looked at up front. There's a master plan as to what is going on with your zoning. The other parts to that is in each zoning district, there are height limitations. Within the county properties, we don't have septic throughout the whole county. So you have to develop your own on-site septic system. There are standards in which control how basically the size of your lot, how big those septic systems can be. For each hotel motel, there's a certain number of gallons per day, per room, per person that we calculate will be produced from that. So in that aspect, then you have to have a leach field area that is of certain size. So if you have a 10-acre piece of property and your building's going to cover 5 acres of it, and your leach field is going to cover 6 acres of it, now you're up to 11 acres. Well, you don't have enough area there. There's a lot of different things that go into the design and the build out on a piece of property. It is not just, oh, we can plop a 30-story building here and here we go. Sublette County doesn't have that capability. It does not have, we have a ladder truck, which would allow a maximum of 3 stories. Within our zoning districts, we do not have any heights that will go to 3 stories. So there's a lot of other restrictions that are built into other chapters within this.
Okay.
Perfect.
So you have a height restriction. Do you have how many hotels and motels can I have on it?
Again, that is all determined by how much ground there is, how much availability there is for water and septic.
And if I have a lot of ground, I could have a lot of hotels and motels?
Yep.
And I wouldn't necessarily, let me go back. So
the other part to that, as soon as you go over 2,000 gallons a day of use, everything gets permitted through the state of Wyoming, through Wyoming DEQ, and follows all of the state standards.
Right, but you could have, I would imagine, I don't want to get in the septic thing. I can imagine you could have several large septic systems. All I'm saying is I'm not trying to argue with you guys. I'm just saying that I think that you are giving up something. Not something, you are giving up as the Planning and Zoning Commission, as the representatives of the folks that live there, as the adjacent neighbors. It's not that you necessarily are adding bad things to the conditional use or the person that's trying to develop, but you're giving other people an opportunity to look at what is happening on that piece of property. And as I said before,
All we're doing right now is discussing these. We're not making any decisions. So we appreciate your comments.
Okay.
And we're going to keep moving. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just, Joe, you want to go ahead?
I just had one thing to clarify on the request that I'd made, and that is the reason that I think those should be moved is because they are currently part of the allowed uses in our RS1, and I'm not requesting that they get removed from the conditional use. I'm getting that they stay as an allowed use. And if somebody looks at the previous regulations, you'd see the difference in the request. So that's all. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Mr.
I was going to say the same thing that Joe just said, that they're currently by right uses, and so the proposed change is actually to move them into a conditional use, and I'm opposed to that.
Perfect. Okay, so with that being said, I think we're going to move on. So it's 8:45. Do we want to tackle light industrial?
Yeah, it should be easy, right?
Yeah.
I'll read it.
Okay.
In the light industrial district, IL light manufacturing, fabrication and processing uses, gas and service stations, laundry and dry cleaning, retail or wholesale storage or sales, 1 ARU per parcel for the owner and or caretaker's residence in conjunction with a business, heavy equipment sales, oil field or mining equipment sales or service, supply and service shops, including plumbing, welding, electrical, and building and automotive, mini storage units, commercial greenhouse / nursery. Conditional uses, you've got commercial greenhouse / nursery. Conditional uses, you've got workers camp, temporary camp, ARU, landing strip, transportation, parking facilities, parking lots and truck terminals, modular manufactured home sales, sanitary landfills, kennels, dog breeder, oil and gas production, waste facility, meat processing and slaughter facilities, salvage and wrecking yards, sawmills and lumber yards, wholesale storage and sales of above ground storage of flammable liquids or gases, poisonous, explosive, or toxic materials recognized as dangerous to animals or humans, gravel pits and washing and screening or crushing, including batch plants to produce concrete, and public facilities.
Okay. Let's dive in. Is there anyone in the public in the room that has comments on this?
Yeah, first. Okay. Couple editorial comments, couple general comments. First, we'll notice, similar to the RS1 district, we've got a lot of by right uses that are now kind of being flipped down to get to conditional uses. And we're opposed to that. It seems like by definition, going back to Lisa Krall's comment, why are we creating all these conditional uses when they're currently permitted uses? And that just creates a second, if you're going through the rezoning process, all those issues come up, and now you got to go through a second step, which is you rezone it, and then you have to go through a conditional use permit. So we're opposed to, salvage and wrecking yards, sawmills and lumber yards, storage above ground flammable liquids, parking lots and truck terminals are all moved to conditional uses now. And the question is why? The fur farm is eliminated from a conditional use and now is only available in rural mixed use. And I believe the last meeting there was somebody had proposed that we do away with rural mixed. And so, if we do away with rural mixed, then fur farms are gone as well, I guess. Would encourage the board to consider adding a general commercial establishment similar to the kind of the broad sweep, going back to the idea of if we've listed all these, is there something we've missed that somebody's going to want to have? If we have a more general catch-all, then we have flexibility to permit, future imagined commercial or business uses. You'll notice that ARU is listed as both a permitted use. These are editorial comments. Are listed as both a permitted use and a conditional use. So we'd recommend it be a permitted use up above and not a conditional use. And then here, the term gas and service station is used where elsewhere it's just service stations. So I don't know if there's a distinction with a gas and service station versus.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Mr. Anspaugh.
Pretty much agree with Mr. Christensen. Why are we limiting light industrial? Why? We don't have enough. I mean, why, guys? We don't want oil and gas. That's what we're doing. We need oil and gas. We need more industrial ground, period. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Moise?
Did you have something?
Oh, no. Okay. I want to be a third or fourth echo. I don't know which one I'm on now, to those comments and in the general philosophical use of the conditional uses. I get that this is I see how this could be used as a tool, like was mentioned earlier, just to give the county a chance to have eyes on more and more projects and have more and more say of what goes in on a specific basis. And part of me understands the concern about that, but I think the overarching part is, and we've talked about this, that those conditional uses are potentially massively restricting people's property rights, and not just restricting people's property rights, but it also puts the county in a position where it has to be absolutely adhering to precedent, because it sets itself up for all kinds of exposure when it says, we'll go ahead and put this, like what you're mentioning earlier. I have a friend who has this light industrial, we're going to allow this, but this one over here, it's a little closer to my house. I don't really want to see that when I go by. And you get these arbitrary, capricious decisions made, and it sets the county up for tremendous liability that it doesn't need. And the courts have been very clear multiple times about what needs to be considered. And it's, if somebody's property is going to be immediately, substantially, and financially damaged, then that's a harm, and that needs to be considered. But if that can't be shown, it needs to be allowed. And so the more that we put these conditional uses, which is really saying we're going to take a more subjective look at a lot of these things, I think it just really, I think the county needs to be really cautious. It's a tempting thing to dive into because we get to have more control and more control. But the flip side to that is we've seen these in other states. This is a slippery slope, and it just leads to more and more and more control and more and more and more control, and creates problems overall.
Thank you, sir.
Is it on? Yeah. Barb Dennis. So where is the light industrial park? Where are we talking to start with?
So there's lots.
Right.
Like up the industrial site road by the
Pinedale lumber
store. Like,
okay.
I think all of those are industrial. There's some at the Daniel Junction. I own one of them. There's
airport.
Out the airport. There's industrial there.
Right.
Also, like Bloomfield behind Wydot, and I believe the lot next door.
Okay, down by Sandra, that's heavy, correct? Or is that light? Okay,
Yeah.
at that point, and commercial.
And commercial, yes.
So why can they bring it back with all that conditional stuff they got going on? Why would we limit trucking to park as it is right now? We have no places to park. Why would we need a permit? Another one, sawmills. Okay, some of us have sawmills. There are a lot of people in the area that are residential that have sawmills, and now we got to have a permit for that to have a sawmill in our yard. We're already buying enough permits and business stuff to start with, and now you're limiting people on what they can do and how they can make money. So I think some of the stuff on the conditional use, I think, needs to be gone and put up so that it's industrial. Let us do our job and help the community and do stuff with it. Like I said, about half the people when you drive through town, I mean, the trucks right now, we're limited with our e-logs and everything else. There's places where these poor guys, there's no place for them to park. Can't even park in town by a gas station. They need help. And then to put a conditional use that we have to buy a permit to have a truck sitting there, I don't think that's right. You're limiting the people that own the property, that were trying to run a business. And some of us are running several businesses off of, because you can, if you're going to stay in Sublette County, most people are doing more than one thing that want to work. And I think you're limiting people by doing what you're doing here.
Thank you. Are there?
Just a quick reminder here. The meeting schedule is scheduled until 9 o'clock. It is giving me warning here that we have 4 minutes left and the online stuff will shut down.
Okay, perfect. So I think that with that being said, we're going to close the meeting for tonight. But we will pick right back up where we left off at our next meeting. And I do apologize. I know that we have more comments. And again, I thank everyone so much. And I know it's a late night and I know people have drove into town to come here but we could definitely stay here all night because this is a big one. So anyhow, thank you for the reminder, Dennis. And like I said, everybody, please write your thoughts down, write your comments, because I know I'm one that I will forget if I don't write something down that I wanted to say. So keep those in mind. And like I said, at the next meeting, which is May.
Is it next week? Next Thursday.
Was it the 15th or the 22nd? Okay. Oh yeah, that's the 3rd. So our next meeting is May 15th at 6 o'clock here in the boardroom again. Or if you're online, obviously you can join us online. So like I said, we will pick up right where we left off.
I thought that next meeting was going to be your regularly scheduled meetings. You take up regular business.
We don't have any regular business. And so, yes, I should have made that clear the last meeting. I apologize. We don't have any regular business on the agenda. So we are going to go ahead and continue with this because we don't have any permits or anything next Thursday at 6 o'clock. So like I said, if everybody will write down all your comments and we'll begin where we left off. So again, thank you guys all so much. Like, this is huge. I know this is a big undertaking, and I know that most of us went through this the first time. We've been here before, but it is something that's super important. And it's important to all of us, and it's important that we all be involved in this because this is a big deal that can affect all of us down the line for sure. So we really appreciate your time. And with that being said, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:58 p.m. Thank you all. Have a great night.